Welcome back to Antics at the Armory. We're here for another Dominaria spoiler video. Today we're going to look at the releases from April 5th. To begin with, we have Precognition Field, 3 generic, 1 blue, at rare for an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library. You may do this at any time. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. Tap 3 generic, exile the top card of your library. So this seems pretty good. I like it for Commander a lot. I like this a lot. It's going to be very good in my Riku deck, especially. Allowing yourself to look at the top card, just knowing what it is, and being able to exile that, get rid of lands you don't need, removal you don't need, and to dig a little bit deeper for the cards you do need. And then on top of that, being able to cast them if they're instant or sorceries is really nice. In Commander, the 4 mana is not going to be an issue. It's actually perfectly costed for Commander. For Standard, I could see this seeing play in some control decks. Yeah, I could see this in some control decks. Maybe some Brawl control. I think it's going to be pretty good in those decks. I don't foresee it seeing Modern play. Legacy, Vintage, I don't think it's going to see any play in there either. Next, we have Llanowar Envoy. 2 generic and 1 green for a creature elf scout at common. Tap 1 generic, 1 green, add 1 mana of any color. And it is a 3/2. It's pretty decently statted. It'll be nice in draft. Sealed, it'll be pretty good. Other than that, I don't see it getting much play. Having to pay 2 mana to get 1 mana of any color isn't good at all. The 3 mana cost for a 3/2 is okay. This really isn't going to go into any standard decks, no modern play, and any format older than that, it's not going to see play. This won't even really see play in Commander at all. Next, we have Daring Archaeologist. 3 generic, 1 white for a creature human artificer at 3/3 and rare. When Daring Archaeologist enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Whenever you cast a historic spell, put a 1/1 counter on Daring Archaeologist. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. Decent card. I could see some standard play. I could see it in limited. It's going to be okay. Depending on what kind of deck you're able to draft, if you get enough artifacts or historic spells, this will be really good. It could be a top-end finisher for those decks. I don't foresee it being played in any older formats. It could see play in Commander. I think it would have a solid home there in artifact builds. Other than that, just a decent card. Next, we have Verix Bladewing, 2 generic, 2 red, legendary creature dragon at Mythic. It is a 4/4 with kicker 3, flying. When Verix Bladewing enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create Karak's Bladewing, a legendary 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This will definitely see standard play. At 4 mana for a 4/4 is already pretty solid. The kicker for 3, putting it at 2 4/4s for 7 mana is really good. This reminds me a lot of Broodmate Dragon, which saw a lot of standard play in its day as well. For Broodmate Dragon, it was 8 mana and you got 2 4/4s. This is 7 mana, 2 4/4s, both with flying, so they have evasion. The only downside is they are legendary creatures, and even the token is legendary, so you aren't even able to like drop another Verix, get rid of your old Verix just to get the token, because it'll cycle both of them out. But I could see it as a 2 or 3 of in very aggressive red decks, because 8 power for 7 mana, or even just 4 power for 4 mana with flying is really good. So this will definitely see standard play. As for Commander, it could definitely see play in the 99. I don't think that this is really a fun build around card, but some people might like it for a mono red deck. As for older formats, I don't foresee this being played in modern, legacy, vintage, anything like that. But it is a pretty good standard card, limited absolute bomb. So you're definitely going to want to pick this up if you have a chance in limited. And yeah, just a pretty good card. Next, we have a card that I'm pretty excited for. It is Jodah, Archmage Eternal. One generic, one blue, one red, one white, so Jeskai colors, for a legendary creature human wizard at rare. It is a 4/3 with flying, and you may pay one white, one blue, one black, one red, and one green, rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So this is pretty much just a Fist of Suns, tacked onto a 4/3 creature. So this is going to see commander play. This is going to be a build around commander. It's going to be a ton of fun dropping Eldrazi for 5 mana. It's going to slot into any deck that Fist of Suns can go into, and obviously that fit its color scheme. But this is a 5-color commander, so you can build around it very easily. And Fist of Suns already sees a lot of commander play, so I foresee this being played in a lot of decks as well. As for standard, I don't foresee a place for it in standard, unless a 5-color good stuff deck comes out. But without things like fetch lands and stuff, it's hard to get that 5-color mana base. But it could happen. As for older formats, I don't see modern, legacy, vintage, anything like that. And in limited, this really isn't all that great. A 4-mana 4/3 with flying is pretty good, but having to have that 3 colors, going Jeskai in limited can be pretty tough. So I think people are going to try and stick away from this. Next, we have Goblin Chain Whirler. For 3 red mana, it is a creature goblin warrior at rare. It is a 3/3 with first strike. When Goblin Chain Whirler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Alright, so this seems like a pretty good goblin. The goblin deck is really shaping up to be decent in standard. Like I've said before, if they get a lord, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. 3/3 for 3 mana is pretty good. The 3 solid red mana can be a little restrictive if you're trying to go, red white or red black or something like that. But if you're in mono red, this is just an instant slot in for the goblin deck. Having first strike is really nice, so 3 power with first strike gets through a lot of stuff, and being able to ping everything when it comes down could clear the board, especially in like token strategies and things like that. Also, against the mirror match, if goblins does become popular, it could wipe out quite a bit of the field. So all in all, I think this is pretty good for standard. Commander, it might slot into some mono red builds in commander. It could. It's not terrible. It's not great. As for modern, legacy, vintage, I don't foresee play. It might get some fringe play in the modern goblin deck. But I think that's about it. Limited, this is okay. If you're able to pull off the 3 red, I would go for it. A 3/3 with first strike for 3 mana is pretty good. So I would definitely play it. All in all, decent card. Next, we have Grand Warlord Radha. 2 generic, 1 red, 1 green, for a legendary creature elf warrior at rare. She is a 3/4 with haste. Whenever one or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps end and phases end. So there's a lot on this card. Commander, it could be pretty fun in an aggressive red-green, maybe a token build. Just getting a ton of mana and maybe, fireballing your opponents down. As for limited, a 3/4 for 4 with haste is really good, and this will give you the mana to cast some of the big stuff. If you have 3, 4, 5 creatures out, could pay for itself, end up being a free card, or maybe even netting you some mana, depending on the situation. As for standard, this could see play. it would have to have a deck kind of built around it, a low aggressive deck, maybe with some top end finishers, but it could happen. As for older formats, I don't think it's going to see a whole lot of modern play, maybe in fringe budget decks. Um, Legacy Vintage, I don't see any play. So yeah, this is mostly a commander and limited, maybe a little bit of standard, but all in all, a fairly decent card. Next, we have Dampening Sphere, 2 generic mana for an artifact at uncommon. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces colorless instead of any other type and amount. Each spell a player casts costs 1 more generic to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. Alright, so this is probably the best card for Modern that I've seen so far. This can slot into any sideboard. It absolutely decimates Storm decks as well as Tron decks. So, I'm definitely going to be putting 2 or 3 of these into my sideboard. The first ability is directly aimed at Tron. It shuts down all the Urza Tron lands, so they can only produce 1 colorless instead of, the 7 that they can produce normally when they get online. And it's going to slow those decks down. As for the 1 additional mana, Storm. They can no longer storm off nearly as easily. They have to build a ton more mana, which is going to slow that deck down tremendously. Even something like, normal burn or combo decks, things like that, this is going to slow it down a little bit, which is going to make it easier for fair decks to compete. So I really like this card. I think it's probably the best sideboard card coming out of this set so far. This will definitely see modern play. The 2 generic and the fact that it can slot into any deck and be used against 2 of the top decks in the meta is really nice. So this will see modern play. This might see some commander play as well because it can shut down a lot of commander strategies. As far as lands go, Sarah's Sanctum in the enchantment decks. You have Gaia's Cradle in the land decks, and basically anything else like that. It shuts down the Storm decks and commander as well. So I think this could see a lot of commander play. Do I think it's a staple? That's really going to depend on your own personal meta, whether or not you require this in all of your decks. As for older formats, I don't really know about Legacy and Vintage. I don't know if it's costed properly for that. It very well might be, and it could shut down a lot of combo decks in the format, but at 2 mana, it might just be too slow. Limited, this really isn't a great limited card. You're going to pull it for the value for other formats rather than playing it. But all in all, I'm pretty excited for this card. Next, we have Adventurous Impulse. For 1 green, it is a sorcery at common. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is a pretty decent card. It's going to allow some filtering early game. This is going to be good for limited as well as standard, I think. This will be put into the dinosaur decks as, another commune with dinosaurs. It only hits 3 cards rather than 5, but all in all, it's still good. As for older formats, Commander, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, I don't think this is going to see a whole lot of play. It might slot into some creature decks just for filtering, but all in all, I think it's going to be more fringe than anything else. Next, we have Lingering Phantom, 5 generic, 1 black for a creature spirit at uncommon. It is a 5/4. Whenever you cast a heroic spell, you may pay 1 black. If you do, return Lingering Phantom from your graveyard to your hand. Alright, so this is limited. This is going to be a limited bomb. The recursion is exactly what you want. Granted, it's 6 mana, so it's a little expensive, but being able to just pay 1 to get it back and keep playing it over and over and over again is exactly what you want. So this is going to be a top pick in limited if you're in black. Other than that, it won't see any play in any other formats. Next, we have the Eldest Reborn, 4 generic, 1 black for an enchantment saga. On 1, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. On 2, each opponent discards a card. On 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So the mana cost is kind of high. The fact that it's an uncommon, this could be pretty good for limited. Having an opponent sack a creature or planeswalker, discarding a card, and then being able to recur it with the 3rd ability is really nice. So it'll probably see limited play. As for standard, I think the mana cost is a big hindrance, and the fact that it's slower. It might see some fringe control play. Other than that, I don't really think so. Commander, it's not that great of a card. And older formats, modern, legacy, vintage, it's not going to see play. But all in all, it's a good, flavorful card, with the art, with Nicobolas coming up, telling, that epic story. So I think it's pretty good. I like it. Next, we have Unwind, 2 generic, 1 blue for an instant at common. Counter target non-creature spell and untap up to 3 lands. Alright, so I think this is pretty good. It's going to see decent limited play if you're in a blue control deck. Standard, I could see it being played quite a bit in any type of control deck. The fact that it costs 3 mana and then you untap 3 lands is really nice. It lets you filter your lands. So, if you are limited in the colors that you have, you can untap certain colors and get them. Also, you can cast this, counter something, untap your lands, and then have them up to counter something else, or to remove a creature or something like that. So I think this is pretty versatile. So in standard, it works really well. In limited, it works really well. This might see some commander play in control decks, maybe like a Teferi deck or in a Talaran deck. I think it could be pretty good. Older formats, I don't think it's going to see much modern play. Legacy, vintage, they have counterspell and force of will and things like that, so I don't think it's going to see play in any of those. But yeah, all in all, actually, it could see some modern play. 3 mana is a little bit more than what you want, and the fact that it's limited to a non-creature spell, so you can't, keep creatures off the board with this, is a hindrance. So it's iffy on modern, but definitely standard and definitely limited. Next, we have a reprint with Juggernaut at 4 generic mana, an artifact creature Juggernaut at uncommon. It is a 5/3. Juggernaut attacks each combat if able, and Juggernaut can't be blocked by walls. Limited, that's really all this is good for. It's going to be played in limited, and that is it. Next, we have Thorn Elemental, 5 generic, 2 green for a creature elemental at uncommon. It is a 7/7. You may have Thorn Elemental assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Limited all-star. This is going to be really good in limited. As for older formats, Commander, Legacy, Vintage, Modern, even Standard, it's not really going to see any play. Next, we have Mesa Unicorn. 1 generic, 1 white for a creature unicorn at common. It is a 2/2 with lifelink. Really good. It's going to be really good and limited. It might see some standard play if a white weenie deck shows up. A 2/2 for 2 with lifelink is pretty good. The best part about this, though, is the fact that it is a unicorn. And just look at that art. It is absolutely beautiful. I love this card. I hope they do more unicorns. Next, we have Fire Elemental. 3 generic, 2 red for a creature elemental at common. It is a 5/4 with no abilities. This is limited. That's it. Nothing more. You're never going to see it outside of limited. There's really nothing else to say. Next, we have Syncopate for X and 1 blue. It is an instant at common. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. I love this. I am a control player at heart, so this is just like every other time it's been printed. It's going to see a lot of standard play in every control deck that's in standard. It's going to see some limited play, not an all-star unlimited, but it's still pretty good. It already sees play in Commander. Doesn't see a whole lot of play in Modern, and Legacy and Vintage it doesn't see play in at all. But it's definitely going to be in Standard, and it has new art on it, which is beautiful. I'm glad it's back. Next, we have Drudge Sentinel. It is 2 generic, 1 black for a creature skeleton warrior at common. It is a 2/1. Tap 3, tap Drudge Sentinel. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Limited play. I don't see this in Standard, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Commander, anything like that. I think it was built for Sealed and Draft, and that's it. But for those formats, it's pretty good. Being able to give it indestructible is really nice. It avoids some removal. It's too bad that it doesn't have like Vigilance or something else tacked on so that you can use it when you attack. But all in all, pretty good. I like it. Next, we have Benelish Honor Guard. 1 generic, 1 white for a creature human knight at common. It is a 2/2. Benelish Honor Guard gets +1/+0 for each legendary creature you control. Alright, so if a knight deck shapes up in Standard, this might get slotted in, depending on how much support it has. If they need some filler cards, this will go in. This could be really good in Draft and Sealed because there's so many legendary creatures and legendary permanents in this set. This could get to be very powerful depending on how you build your deck. As for other formats, Commander, Legacy, Standard, Modern, it's not really going to see play unless there's a Knight deck that, has an open slot to fill. Next, we have Gitu Journey Mage. 2 generic, 1 red for a creature human wizard at common. It is a 3/2. When Gitu Journey Mage enters the battlefield, if you control another wizard, Gitu Journey Mage deals 2 damage to each opponent. Good for the blue-red wizard deck in Limited. As for Standard, if the wizard deck shows up, this might have a slot. Commander, not really. Modern, I wouldn't be putting this in the wizard deck that I'm planning on building. And older formats, no, it's not going to see play. This is mainly just a limited card. Next, we have Naru Meha, Master Wizard. 2 generic, 2 blue for a legendary creature human wizard at Mythic. It is a 3/3 with flash. When Naru Meha, Master Wizard, enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Other wizards you control get +1/+1. Alright, so limited in the blue-red wizard deck, this is going to be really, really good. As for Standard, if the wizard deck shapes up, this will be in Standard. Modern, it is a little clunkier than I would like. The fact that it can only copy your instant or sorceries hinders it a little bit. So, for example, you need 5 mana just to copy a bolt. So you bolt, flash this in, copy the bolt. You're still doing 6 damage and getting a 3/3 body, which is really good. But you have to have that extra mana. If it was at 3 mana or maybe 2 mana like Snapcaster Mage, this would be a lot better. I would prefer it being, a 2 mana 1/1 with flash and maybe not buffing wizards. But depending on your build, it could be very useful. So I'm going to test with 2 of these in the modern wizard deck I'm building, and we'll see how it goes. Next, we have Ungoros the Empty One. I'm not going to go over this card because it was spoiled by Jumbo Commander. It was their preview card, so I am going to put a link to their video down in the description so you can check it out. They're another Magic YouTuber that focuses exclusively on Commander, and they're really good. I would suggest checking them out and subscribing. Along that same lines, our next card is Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. I'm not going to go over this card either. There will be a link in the description to Loading Ready Run's review of this card because it was also their preview card. So I would recommend checking them out. If you haven't heard of Loading Ready Run, I would get out from underneath the rock you're under and check them out because they're absolutely amazing. So, this is Colin from Antics at the Armory with all of the previews for April 5th from Dominaria. This set is shaping up to be pretty good. I'm really excited about it. If you enjoyed the video, then like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications, and leave us a comment and let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you hate, what you want to see, what you hope's in the set, anything. So yeah, have a great day.